should have never let my guard down. That night the house was eerily silent, except for the occasional creak of the wooden floors beneath my bare feet. The dim glow of the hallway light barely reached the living room, where I stood, arms crossed, staring. At the clock on the wall, it was nearly midnight. My husband was out of town, and my sister had asked me for a favor to let her son Anton stay over for the weekend. I had agreed without hesitation. Anton had always been the quiet, respectful type. Tall for his age, with sharp features that made him look older than he was. He had always called me auntie with that smooth, polite tone, his gaze never lingering too long, never crossing any lines. At least that's what I had thought. I turned off the TV and sighed, stretching my arms over my head. Maybe I should check on him. He had spent most of the evening in the guest room keeping to himself, but something about the stillness of the house made me uneasy. I walked toward his door and knocked. Gently. "Anton, you still awake?" "No." Response. I hesitated, then slowly pushed the door open. The room was dark, the only illumination coming from his phone screen. He was lying on the bed, shirtless, his toned frame barely covered by the thin blanket. His eyes flickered toward me as he propped himself up on one elbow. "Auntie," his voice was husky low. I cleared, my throat suddenly feeling out of place. "I just wanted to check on you. You've been quiet all evening." He smirked, his gaze trailing down my figure before he looked away. "I'm fine, just thinking about what I asked." Stepping inside, he let out a breathy chuckle. "You." A strange tension crackled in the air. My pulse quickened. "Anton, don't joke like that." "Who said I was joking?" His voice was smooth, controlled, too controlled. I should have walked out right then, should have shut the door and put some distance between us. But I didn't, and that's when everything started to change. I should have left the room. I should have turned around, closed the door behind me, and walked away. But I didn't. Something. And by the way Anton looked at me, so calm, so confident, made my feet feel like they were sinking into the floor. My breath came in shallow waves as I forced a chuckle, trying to shake off the thick, suffocating tension that had settled between us. "Anton, this isn't funny," I muttered, folding my arms more to steady myself. Than anything else, he didn't flinch, didn't laugh. He just leaned back against the headboard, his toned chest rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. "I never said it was," he murmured. His voice was deep, almost daring. I swallowed hard. "You've had a long day. Get some sleep." Turned to leave, but before I could take a step, his voice stopped me. "You don't have to be scared of me." I froze, scared. I slowly turned back to face him. But this time, his expression had changed. The smirk was gone. His dark eyes, so familiar yet suddenly unreadable, locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach tighten. "You always look so tense." He said, his voice softer now almost, teasing, "Is it because you don't trust me, or because you don't trust yourself?" My lips parted, but no words came out. He wasn't a child anymore. He wasn't the boy who used to run around my house playing with toy cars and begging for cookies. He was a man now, tall built, with a presence that filled the room like thick smoke, and he knew it. I forced a small, breathless laugh, shaking my head. "You need to stop talking like this. Anton, like..." What his brow lifted slightly. "Like a man..." I felt the heat creeping up my neck. "You're my nephew," I reminded him, though my voice lacked the firmness I needed. He studied me, his gaze never wavering. "That's just a word," he said. "After a moment doesn't change what's happening right now." My heart pounded. "And what exactly do you think is happening?" I challenged, trying to regain control of the situation. His lips twitched, but he didn't answer. Instead, he slowly pushed the blanket off, revealing more of his bare skin, his muscles shifting as he sat up completely. I took an instinctive step back, Big mistake because he noticed. "You're nervous," he observed his voice. Almost amused why I clenched my jaw because you're acting like I see you. He interrupted, his voice suddenly closer. I hadn't even realized he had moved. Like I've always seen you. The air left my lungs in a sharp exhale. This was wrong. It was beyond wrong. But my body wasn't listening to my mind. "Go to sleep," I whispered, gripping the doorknob behind me, "before you say something you regret." Exhaled, tilting his head slightly. "I never regret telling the truth." I yanked the door open, stepping out as quickly as I could. The moment his shoot it behind me, I pressed my back against the cool wood, my chest rising and falling with erratic breaths. What just happened? I should have been angry, should have stormed back inside and put an end to whatever. This was before it even started. But instead, all I could think about was the way he'd looked at me, and the fact that I wasn't sure if I wanted him to stop. I barely slept that night. No matter how many times I turned over, pulled the blanket tighter, or forced my eyes shut, my mind wouldn't quiet down. Anton's voice echoed in my head, his words, his gaze, the way he looked at me. Like he knew something I didn't like. He'd been waiting for me to see it too. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. I wasn't supposed to let my thoughts drift back to the way his body moved when he sat up, the way his voice had wrapped around me like a slow, deliberate temptation. I wasn't supposed to want to open that door again. The clock on my nightstand glowed 47 a.m. I groaned, pushing the sheets off me, my body burning from the inside out. Maybe I just needed a glass of water, a distraction, something to bring me back to my senses. Padding softly down the hallway, I kept my steps light, careful not to make any noise. The house was eerily still, there thick with something I couldn't name. I reached the kitchen, grabbed a glass, and filled it with water, my fingers tightening around the cool surface as I took slow, measured sips. Breathe. Just breathe. But the moment I turned around, I froze. Anton was standing in the doorway. His shirt was still off sweatpants, hanging low on his hips, his lean muscles casting sharp shadows under the dim light. His expression was unreadable, his eyes locked onto mine with that same quiet intensity. I swallowed hard, gripping the counter behind me. Couldn't sleep. My voice came out softer than I intended. He took a slow step forward. "Neither could you." I tried to smile, tried to act normal, but the air between us was anything but "It's just hot tonight," murmured. Taking another sip of water to distract myself, he leaned against the fridge, his arms crossing over his chest. "That's not why." I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "Anton, are you going to keep pretending?" He cut me off, his voice low. "Because I won't." I blinked, my breath hitched. "I don't know what you're talking about." His lips curved, but there was no amusement in his eyes. "Yes, you do." My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. The distance between us felt non-existent, even though he was still a few feet away. "You shouldn't talk to me like this," I whispered. "Why not?" He tilted his head. "Because of a label. Because it's wrong." I shot back, my grip tightening on the glass. His gaze darkened. "Then why are you still standing here?" I had no answer for the took another step closer. I should have moved, should have pushed past him and gone back to my room, but my legs refused to listen. I could feel the heat radiating off him now, the way his breath ghosted against my skin. He was too close. "Say the word." He murmured, "Tell me to leave." Silence. A thick, heavy silence that made my pulse hammer in my throat. Say it, tell him to go, but didn't. I couldn't. And he knew it. His fingers brushed against, mine barely touching, but the sensation shot through me like fire. I inhaled, sharply, my body betraying me in ways I never thought possible. Then, just as quickly as he had come close, he pulled back. "Good night, Auntie," he said softly, his lips barely twitching before he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the hallway I stood. There, gripping the counter, my legs trembling. This was a dangerous game, and I had just let him take the first move. I didn't leave my room the next morning. The sunlight spilled through the curtains, painting golden streaks across sheets, but I refused to acknowledge. My body felt like it was burning from the inside out, every nerve ending still tingling from last night's encounter. In the kitchen, I had let him get too close. I had let myself want it. The shame curled in my stomach, coiling tighter with every breath. I told myself it was nothing, that I had imagined it, that Anton was just testing boundaries, pushing limits the way men his age did, cocky, reckless, unaware of the consequences. But deep down, I knew that was a lie, because I hadn't imagined the way his fingers had brushed against mine, the way his voice had dipped when he said goodnight, Auntie, the way I'd waited for something more. A knock at my door sent a jolt through me. I shot up, my heart hammering, yeah. The handle turned, and before I could say anything else, Anton stepped inside. I sucked in a sharp breath. He was fresh out of the shower, hair damp, his white t-shirt clinging to his broad shoulders. He didn't look like the boy I used to tuck into bed when he decided. During the summers, he looked like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. Please subscribe channel. I pulled the blanket over myself, my pulse spiking. You could have waited for me to say comin'. He smirked. You didn't say no. Either. I exhaled through my nose, gripping the sheets tighter. What do you want, Anton? He leaned against the door frame, arms crossing over his chest. You avoided me all morning. I swallowed. I was just tired. His gaze flickered over me. Slow, deliberate liar. I clenched my jaw, trying to summon the strength to shut him down, to regain the control I had lost last night. Anton, this can't happen. Whatever you think is going on, it needs to stop. He took a step forward, as stiffened. I mean it. His lips twitched. Then why are you shaking? I hated him for noticing, hated that he could see through the walls. I was desperately trying to build. You're playing with fire. I whispered. His jaw tightened, and for the first time, I saw something flicker in his expression. Something darker, something almost possessive. Maybe I want to get burned. I sucked in a breath. He took another step. Tell me to leave. He murmured, just like last night. I opened my mouth, and then the front door slammed shut downstairs. I jolted. My sister was home. Anton's gaze stayed on mine for a long, unbearable second before his lips curled into a knowing smirk. Saved by the bell, he murmured. Then just like that, he turned and walked out of my room, leaving me gripping the sheets. My entire body trembling. This wasn't over. Not even close. I could barely breathe. Even after Anton walked out of my room. Even after I heard my sister's voice downstairs, my body remained frozen in place, my fingers gripping the sheets like they were the only thing keeping me grounded. This wasn't normal, this wasn't right. But tell that to the fire still licking through my veins. I forced myself out of bed, running a hand through my hair as I took deep breaths. I needed to get a grip. I needed to act normal, because if my sister so much as looked at me the wrong way, I knew I would crumble under the weight of this thing that had taken hold of me, straightening my clothes. I walked downstairs, finally awake. My sister, Helena, teased from the kitchen, pulling groceries out of the bags. I was starting to think you'd sleep the whole day away. I forced a smile, pretending that my world wasn't completely unraveling at the seams. I just had a long night. Anton was sitting at the table, relaxed, calm. Like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just cornered me in my own room and dared me to stop him. His gaze lifted the moment I walked in. I felt it skim over me, slow and knowing, like he was waiting for me to react, like he wanted me to. I ignored him. I had to. Helena glanced between us, frowning slightly. Something going on my stomach. Clenched. What? No, why? She shrugged, placing a carton of milk in the fridge. I don't know, you just look weird. I let out a forced laugh, moving to grab a glass from the cupboard. Thanks, Anton, the absolute devil. Chuckled under his breath. I shot him a warning look, but he just smirked like he enjoyed watching me squirm like he was in control now. And the worst part, Helena didn't notice the tension, crackling in the air. Oh, by the way, she said casually, I have to go to the office. Again. Tonight, last-minute client dinner, do you mind keeping an eye on Anton Form? My heart stopped. I went rigid, fingers straightening around the glass. Anton home with me alone. This couldn't be happening. Helena didn't wait for my response. I should be back late. Maybe after midnight, you two will be okay, right? Anton leaned back in his chair, stretching in a way that made my breath hitch. Oh, I think we'll be just fine. I snapped my gaze to him, my chest tightening. He was enjoying this every second of it. Helena smiled. Oblivious, great, I'll head out around 7. I barely heard the rest of the conversation. All I could think about was the way Anton was, looking at me, the way his fingers slowly tapped against the wooden table, the way his smirk held a silent promise tonight. This wouldn't be left unfinished. The house was too quiet. Helena had left 2 hours ago, and I'd done everything I could to keep myself busy washing dishes, folding laundry, even watching the most mind-numbing show I could find on TV. But no matter what I did, I felt him. Anton lurking, watching, waiting. I told myself I wouldn't. Goop stares. I told myself I'd stay on the couch, keep my mind occupied and pretend. Nothing had ever happened. But then I heard it. The slow, deliberate creak of a floorboard. I turned my head pulse spiking. Anton stood at the top of the stairs, leaning against the railing, his dark eyes locked onto mine. He didn't say a word. He didn't have. To the weight of his stare alone was enough to pin me in place. I was wondering how long you'd avoid me, he finally murmured. I swallowed hard. I'm not avoiding you. A smirk, really. I forced my gaze back to the TV, even though I wasn't actually watching it. Go to bed, Anton. I heard him move slow and hurried footsteps down. The stairs are, you scared of me. I exhaled sharply, gripping the throw pillow on my lap. Go-tubed, I felt him before I saw him. The warmth of his body, the presence of him standing so close behind the couch that I could practically feel the heat radiating. Off him, you weren't scared. Last night, he murmured. My throat tightened. That was a mistake. A pause, and tonight I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing air into my lungs. Anton. This is wrong. Silence. Then I don't care. A shiver raced down my spine. Tell me you don't want this? He said, voice quiet, but firm. Tell me to leave right now, and I will. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because we both knew the truth. The air between us grew heavier, thicker, charged, with something neither of us were willing to name. My fingers trembled against the pillow, and when I finally turned my head, I was met with the intensity of his gaze. His jaw was tight. His hands were clenched. But the worst part, I wasn't sure who was going to break first, him or me, and then the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Helena. I jolted back to reality so fast it made my head spin. Anton exhaled slowly, his eyes still locked onto mine. Saved by the bell, he murmured, his lips curling. Then without another word, he turned and disappeared into the shadows of the hallway, leaving me breathless, trembling and painfully aware that this wasn't the end, not even close it.